At the heart of this town stood Brooksville High School, a place where futures were shaped, dreams were nurtured, and teachers were regarded with unwavering respect. Among them, Mr. Daniel Carter was a shining example of dedication and passion. Daniel Carter had been an English teacher for nearly 2 decades. At 42, he was well-liked by students and staff alike. His lectures on Shakespeare and Hemingway were engaging, filled with an infectious enthusiasm that made even the most reluctant students take an interest in literature. He had a gift, a way of making words come alive, of turning literature into something more than just stories on a page. To his students, he was more than just a teacher. He was a mentor, someone they could confide in. His door was always open, his advice always thoughtful. He pushed his students to think critically, to question, to analyze, and to believe in their potential. It was no surprise that many considered him their favorite teacher. Among his colleagues, Daniel was seen as a dedicated educator. He was always the first to arrive at school and often the last to leave. He volunteered to lead extracurricular activities, helped struggling students after hours, and attended every school function. To the outside world, he was the perfect teacher. But beneath the surface of his professional life, Daniel harbored a secret longing, one that blurred the lines between ethics and desire. He had always prided himself on his discipline, his ability to separate personal feelings from his work. Yet, when Olivia Turner walked into his classroom during a parent-teacher meeting, everything changed. What started as innocent admiration quickly turned into something more. A dangerous attraction that would set off a chain of events leading to deception, betrayal, and ultimately murder. Olivia Turner had always turned heads. At 39, she carried herself with an effortless grace that made her stand out in a town as small as Brooksville. Auburn hair that framed her delicate features, and a quiet confidence that drew people in. She was the kind of woman who commanded attention without trying. A single mother to 17-year-old Emily, Olivia had spent the last decade balancing work, motherhood, and the remnants of a failed marriage. She worked as an interior designer, often taking on projects in neighboring towns to keep up with the bills. Despite her busy schedule, she was deeply devoted to Emily, determined to give her the best life possible. The first time Daniel Carter met Olivia, it was during a routine parent-teacher conference. Emily was one of his brightest students, sharp, articulate, and passionate about literature. She had inherited her mother's confidence but channeled it into her academic ambitions. Daniel had always enjoyed mentoring students like Emily, those with a thirst for knowledge and a drive to succeed. When Olivia walked into the classroom that evening, Daniel felt something shift. He had met hundreds of parents over the years, but none had left an impression quite like this. There was an effortless elegance about her, a presence that filled the room. As she settled into the chair across from him, Daniel found himself momentarily distracted, his carefully rehearsed teacher-parent script faltering. "Emily speaks very highly of you, Mr. Carter," Olivia said, offering a warm smile. "She says your class is the only one worth waking up early for." Daniel chuckled, adjusting the papers in front of him to regain composure. "That's very kind of her. Emily is a remarkable student. She has a natural talent for writing." The conversation flowed effortlessly. What started as a discussion about Emily's academic progress quickly turned into something more personal. Olivia shared bits of her life, her struggles as a single mother, the challenges of raising a teenager alone, and the loneliness that often crept in despite her busy career. Daniel listened intently, drawn in by her voice, her vulnerability. Before long, the meeting had stretched far beyond its intended time. Other parents had come and gone, yet Olivia lingered, as if neither of them wanted to leave. When she finally stood to go, there was an unspoken understanding between them. Something had shifted, a connection had been made. As Olivia walked out of the classroom that day, Daniel found himself watching her go, his mind clouded with thoughts he knew he shouldn't entertain. What had started as an innocent conversation was about to spiral into something far more dangerous, an affair that would shatter lives and end in tragedy. The first few weeks after the parent-teacher conference were filled with stolen glances and lingering smiles. Daniel Carter knew he was crossing a line, but he convinced himself it was harmless, just an innocent attraction. Olivia Turner, too, felt the magnetic pull between them, though she hesitated at first. She was a mother before anything else, and Emily's well-being always came first. But temptation has a way of eroding even the strongest walls of restraint. It started with casual emails, discussions about Emily's assignments that quickly drifted into late-night messages about books, life, and regrets. Then came the unplanned encounters, Olivia dropping by Daniel's classroom after school under the guise of discussing Emily's progress, her perfume lingering in the air long after she left. The first time they met outside of school, it was purely accidental, or so they told themselves. Olivia had been at a cafe downtown when she spotted Daniel sitting alone, grading papers. She hesitated, but when he looked up and met her gaze, she knew she couldn't just walk away. She sat down across from him, and soon, their conversation took on a life of its own. One meeting turned into another. The boundaries between them blurred until they became meaningless. Before long, they were stealing moments whenever they could. Secret rendezvous at a hotel outside of town. Lingering touches when no one was watching, whispered confessions in the dark. Daniel had never felt so alive. His days were spent in the structured world of academia, but his nights with Olivia were filled with passion, risk, and an intoxicating sense of danger. For Olivia, Daniel was a refuge from the loneliness that had consumed her for years. He made her feel wanted, desired, but in the back of her mind, she knew they were playing with fire. Emily began to notice changes in her mother. Late-night phone calls, mysterious smiles, sudden disappearances. At first, she chalked it up to work stress. But when she saw Daniel Carter and her mother exchange a knowing glance at school, suspicion crept in. Then, one evening, Emily came home earlier than expected. She had planned to surprise her mother with takeout from her favorite restaurant. But as she stepped inside, she froze. Laughter echoed from the living room. A half-empty wine glass sat on the coffee table. And then she saw them, Daniel and Olivia, sitting close, his hand resting on hers. Emily's heart pounded in her chest as anger surged through her. Her teacher, her mother, together, she had uncovered their secret. And now everything was about to change. Emily Turner stood frozen in the doorway, her breath hitching in her throat as she processed what she was seeing. Her mother, her teacher, together, the warmth of their laughter, the intimate way Daniel's fingers brushed against Olivia's hand. It was all too much. The takeout bag in her grip crinkled loudly as her hands clenched into fists. At the sound, Olivia's head snapped up. Her smile faded instantly, replaced by wide-eyed panic. Daniel, too, turned, his usual composure faltering as he locked eyes with Emily. Emily, Olivia started, rising from the couch. "Sweetheart, this isn't what it looks like." Emily let out a bitter laugh, her voice trembling with anger. "Oh, really? Because it looks exactly like what I think it is." Daniel stood, his expression a mix of guilt and unease. "Emily, please, let's talk about this." But Emily wasn't interested in talking. Her mind raced, a swirl of emotions crashing over her. Betrayal, disgust, fury. She had always admired Mr. Carter, respected him, even looked up to him. And now, to see him with her mother, it made her stomach churn. "How long?" she demanded, her voice sharp. "How long have you been sneaking around behind my back?" Olivia hesitated, glancing at Daniel as if searching for the right words. That hesitation was all the answer Emily needed. Tears burned at the corners of her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. "I can't believe this," she whispered. "You're my mother. You're supposed to protect me. Not." She shook her head, unable to finish the thought. Olivia reached out, but Emily jerked away. "Don't," she snapped. "I don't want to hear your excuses." With that, she turned on her heel and stormed out of the house, slamming the door behind her. A dangerous shift. Emily's mind reeled as she walked aimlessly through the streets of Brooksville. The night air was cool, but she barely noticed. Her mother, her own mother, was having an affair with her teacher. How long had they been lying to her? Sneaking around behind her back? The betrayal cut deep. Olivia had always taught Emily to be strong, to stand up for herself, to never let anyone manipulate her. And yet, here she was playing the role of the deceiver. And Daniel Carter, the man who had inspired her love for literature, the teacher she had trusted. He was nothing more than a hypocrite, a man willing to risk everything for a selfish affair. As Emily wandered, dark thoughts began creeping in. What if the school found out? What if Daniel lost his job? What if everyone knew what kind of woman Olivia really was? A slow, cold determination settled over her. She wouldn't be silent. She wouldn't let them get away with this. By the time she returned home, her decision was made. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Emily barely spoke to her mother over the next few days. Olivia tried to reach out, but every attempt was met with cold silence. At school, Emily avoided Daniel Carter's class altogether, refusing to make eye contact when passing him in the halls. The betrayal burned inside her, growing into something darker, something dangerous. She couldn't unsee what she had walked in on. The sight of her mother and Mr. Carter together played on a loop in her mind. The more she thought about it, the more her anger turned into something deeper, more consuming. This wasn't just a mistake. This was a betrayal of trust. And betrayal had consequences. On Friday evening, Olivia sat at the kitchen table, waiting for Emily to come home. When she finally walked in, Olivia exhaled in relief. "Emily, please," Olivia said softly. "We need to talk." Emily dropped her backpack by the door, her expression unreadable. "Talk about what? How you lied to me? How you've been sneaking around with my teacher?" Olivia flinched. "I never wanted to hurt you. I never planned for any of this to happen." Emily crossed her arms. "But it did. And now you expect me to just be okay with it?" Before Olivia could respond, Emily pulled out her phone and placed it on the table. With a slow, deliberate motion, she pressed play. Daniel's voice filled the room. "You know I can't risk anyone finding out, Olivia. If the school knew about us, my career would be over." Olivia's face went pale. "Emily, where did you get this?" Emily's lips curled into a cold smile. "You left your phone unlocked. Guess you and Daniel weren't as careful as you thought." Panic flashed in Olivia's eyes. "Emily, you don't understand. This isn't something you can just expose." "Oh, I understand perfectly," Emily said, her voice sharper now. "You're protecting him. You're protecting yourself. But you never once thought about how this would affect me." Olivia reached for the phone, but Emily snatched it away. "You think I won't tell the school? The whole town? People deserve to know who you really are." "Emily, please," Olivia pleaded. "Just delete the recording." Emily shook her head. "You made your choice, Mom. Now it's my turn." Olivia's breathing grew unsteady. Desperation took over as she lunged forward, trying to grab the phone. In the struggle, Emily stumbled backward, knocking into the kitchen counter. Then, everything happened in an instant. Olivia reached again, but Emily shoved her away hard. Olivia lost her balance. Her foot slipped against the tiled floor. She flailed, trying to grab onto something. Anything. But there was nothing. Her head struck the corner of the marble countertop with a sickening crack. The room went silent. Emily's heart pounded as she stared down at her mother's motionless body. Blood pooled beneath Olivia's head, seeping into the cracks of the tile. Emily's breath came in short gasps. No, this wasn't supposed to happen." She dropped to her knees, shaking her mother's shoulder. "Mom," she whispered. "Mom, wake up." But Olivia Turner would never wake up again. Emily's mind raced. What do I do? Call 911? Say it was an accident? But panic clouded her thoughts. No one will believe me. They'll think I killed her on purpose. Her hands trembled as she grabbed her phone. Not to call for help, but to erase the recording. It was evidence now, proof of the fight that led to this moment. And then, a chilling thought settled in. What would Mr. Carter do if he found out? She stared at her mother's lifeless body, realization dawning. This wasn't just her secret anymore. This involved him too. Emily swallowed hard and picked up the phone. She had one call to make, and Daniel Carter was the only person who could help her now. Emily stood over her mother's body, her breath ragged, her mind spiraling. The room was eerily silent except for the sound of her own heartbeat hammering in her chest. She had seconds, maybe minutes, before reality would crash over her like a tidal wave. Then, her phone vibrated in her hand. A text from Daniel Carter. "Everything okay? You seemed off in class today." Emily swallowed hard. "No, everything is not okay. My mother is dead, and I have no idea what to do." Her hands shook as she typed back. "I need your help. Now." Daniel's response came almost instantly. "Where are you?" Emily hesitated. Could she really trust him? He was part of the reason this had happened in the first place. But she had no one else. Home. Alone. 15 minutes later, Daniel Carter's car pulled into the driveway. Emily met him at the door, her face pale, eyes wide with shock. "What happened?" he demanded, stepping inside. She didn't answer. She just pointed toward the kitchen. Daniel's breath caught in his throat when he saw Olivia's lifeless body sprawled on the floor, the blood already congealing around her head. He took a step back, running a hand through his hair. "Jesus Christ, Emily." "It was an accident," Emily whispered. She tried to grab my phone. She slipped and hit her head. Daniel exhaled sharply, rubbing his temples. This is bad, Emily." Tears welled in her eyes. "I know." He paced the room, processing. If the police got involved, the affair would come out. His career would be over. His life, everything he had worked for, gone in an instant. "We have to be smart about this," he finally said. "No one can know I was here." Emily looked at him, desperation in her gaze. "You're not going to help me?" "I am," he said quickly. "But we have to get our story straight. If the police suspect anything, they'll tear everything apart." Emily wiped at her face. "What do I do?" Daniel knelt beside Olivia's body, his mind working fast. "First, we make it look like a break-in." For the next hour, Emily and Daniel staged the house. Daniel knocked over a lamp, scattered Olivia's purse on the floor, and pried open a window from the outside. He placed a pair of gloves on Emily's shaking hands and handed her a kitchen knife. "You need to make it look like you fought back. A cut on your arm. Not too deep, just enough to make it believable." Emily's stomach turned, but she obeyed. She winced as the blade sliced through her skin, blood trickling down her arm. Daniel nodded in approval. "Good. Now, when the police come, you tell them you walked in on a burglary. You struggled, but the attacker pushed you and ran. You hit your head and blacked out." Emily's breath hitched. "What if they don't believe me?" "They will," he assured her. "Just stick to the story. No matter what." With everything in place, Emily took a shaky breath and dialed 911. 911, "What's your emergency?" "Someone broke into my house," she stammered, forcing panic into her voice. "My mom. She's hurt. I think she's dead." The dispatcher's voice was calm but urgent. "Stay on the line, honey. Help is on the way." Emily dropped the phone, staring at Daniel with wide eyes. There was no turning back now. Outside, the distant wail of sirens grew closer. The first officer on the scene, Detective James Holloway, took one look at the staged crime scene and felt something was off. The forced entry seemed too perfect. The scattered purse too deliberate. And then there was Emily, shaken but oddly composed for someone who had just lost her mother. "Can you walk me through what happened?" he asked gently, his sharp gaze assessing her every reaction. Emily sniffled, clutching the bandaged cut on her arm. "I got home and saw the door open. I walked in and saw a man. He attacked me and She hesitated, as if recalling the story. "I tried to fight back, but he shoved me, and I hit my head. When I woke up, he was gone. And my mom," her voice broke on cue. "She was already dead." Holloway nodded slowly. "Did you see his face?" Emily shook her head. "No. It all happened so fast." The detective glanced around, his instincts tingling. Something wasn't right, and he intended to find out exactly what. Detective James Holloway had been in law enforcement for over 15 years, and he had seen countless crime scenes. Something about this one didn't sit right. The staged break-in was too neat, too methodical. The scattered purse, the forced window, it all felt rehearsed. And then there was Emily. She was grieving, but there was something calculated beneath her tears. Holloway had seen genuine grief before, the uncontrollable sobs, the raw devastation. Emily's distress seemed performed. As he watched the forensic team comb through the house, a uniformed officer approached him. "Detective, we found something in the trash outside." Holloway followed him to the backyard, where a plastic evidence bag contained a bloodied pair of latex gloves. His jaw tightened. Why would a burglar wear gloves but still leave obvious signs of a break-in? It didn't add up. Then the officer handed him something else, a cell phone. "Found this in the same bin, sir. It's cracked, but it still powers on." Holloway flipped it over and saw the screen light up. The wallpaper was of Olivia and Emily, smiling at the beach. Olivia's phone. His pulse quickened. "Get this to tech. I want to know if there are any deleted messages, calls, anything that might tell us what was going on before the murder." Back inside, Emily sat on the couch, wrapped in a blanket. Daniel Carter stood nearby, his expression unreadable. Holloway approached them. "Emily, I need to ask you a few more questions," he said. Emily looked up, her hands trembling. "Okay, you said you were attacked. That you struggled with the intruder?" Emily nodded. "Yes. He pushed me, and I hit my head." Holloway crouched down to her level. "So why didn't we find any footprints outside?" There was no mud tracked inside. No signs of forced movement. Emily's throat tightened. I don't know. Maybe he..." Holloway cut her off. "And why did we find a pair of bloody gloves in your garbage can?" Her mouth went dry. She turned to Daniel, panic flashing in her eyes. He stepped forward. "Detective, she's been through enough." "Mr. Carter," Holloway said, fixing him with a sharp stare. "Why are you here? You're her teacher, correct?" Daniel hesitated. "Yes, but I was concerned for her. I came as soon as I heard what happened." Holloway studied him carefully. "How did you hear about it?" "She didn't call you. She called 911. Daniel stiffened, but before he could answer, another officer stepped in. "Detective, we got the phone records." Holloway took the file, flipping through it quickly. His eyes darkened. He turned back to Emily. "Emily, why did you delete a recording from your mother's phone an hour before you called 911? Emily's breath hitched. I don't know what you're talking about." Holloway nodded to the officer, who played an audio file from Olivia's phone. Daniel's voice crackled through the speaker. "You know I can't risk anyone finding out, Olivia. If the school knew about us, my career would be over." Silence filled the room. Emily's hands curled into fists. She glanced at Daniel, who was staring straight ahead, his face pale. Holloway exhaled, standing up. "Emily Turner, you're under arrest for the murder of Olivia Turner." Emily let out a strangled sob as the officer pulled her up and began reading her rights. "No, please. It was an accident." Daniel took a step back, his face drenched in shock. "Detective, she wouldn't do this." Holloway turned to him. "You're not off the hook either, Mr. Carter. If you helped cover this up, we'll find out." As Emily was led to the police car, she locked eyes with Daniel one last time. Tears streamed down her face. And for the first time since the night everything fell apart, she realized he wasn't going to save her. The courtroom was packed. Reporters, townspeople, and students from Brooksville High all gathered to witness the trial of Emily Turner. The prosecution painted a damning picture. Emily had discovered her mother's affair with Mr. Carter, confronted Olivia in a fit of rage, and killed her. Then, with Carter's help, she staged the scene to look like a burglary gone wrong. The defense argued it was an accident, that Olivia had fallen during an argument. But the deleted phone recording, the staged break-in, and the discarded gloves told a different story. Daniel Carter took the stand, distancing himself from Emily. He claimed he had only tried to protect her and denied involvement in the murder. His reputation was shattered, but he walked away free. After days of deliberation, the jury reached a verdict. Guilty. Emily sobbed as the judge sentenced her to 25 years to life for second-degree murder. As she was led away in handcuffs, she locked eyes with Daniel one last time. He never looked back.